Best Nothing to Lose theme from The Party. Chuck Levin's here, going to continue on now. Sherman Irby and Betty the Baptist.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just a sort of a public notice to the folks that are streaming in. Those of you that are streaming, you are in the right location. We're going to start in just a minute. There are a couple of folks that are still filling plates in the back of the room. So if you could fill your plates and come grab yourself a seat, and we'll get started with our guest speaker. For those of you who are streaming in, please feel free to tweet questions to our innovation Twitter account, and we will pass them on to our guest speaker. So we'll be ready to start in just a minute. Thank you. Okay, can you put the first screen up first? Yeah. Will you be able to manipulate it remotely, or do you need to do it? Okay. Okay. Yeah, leave it there until I finish up introducing. Okay, so we're ready to get started. It is a real pleasure to introduce our guest today, Hope Doyley-Gray, who is, as you can see, we just had a conversation about the fact that she's not a scientist, but she lives in the science world. She's a lawyer. For those of you who know Barbara Schilberg, who runs BioAdvance, Barbara also has that background. We had a couple of fun stories and jokes about the women in the legal world who gravitate towards science and how they manage to convert that into value. Of course, that's embodied in our own Heather Rose, who is both a JD and a PhD. She manages to, keep all of those balls up in the air and convert them into value. I want to say just a couple of words about Hope and one of her colleagues, who is one of our colleagues, one of our old friends from the earliest days, what I think of as the early ugly days of the creation of the innovation pillar. Joan Lau, who is just one of the most talented women in this space, is a colleague of Hope's. Hope served as their general counsel. They're in the process of selling Militia Hill Ventures, she and her partner Jane Hollingsworth. So they're on to some new great adventures, and Hope will be along for the ride and doing all kinds of wild and crazy things. I think what's really interesting about women in this space is that I think we bring kind of a different orientation to kind of the way that we see things and how we pursue things. It's with a different kind of grit. This is probably a doctoral study for somebody who's interested in trying to sort these kinds of things out. But in my limited exposure to Hope, I can tell you the grit just oozes out of her, because she's got really interesting dynamic about what she cares about, what she does in terms of innovation and business development. And so we're just very lucky to have her joining us today for this presentation. Thank you, Hope. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to this innovation pillar. I hope we'll be okay if I stand a little bit in front of this, or should I? Oh, I don't really have anything? Oh, well, I'll just hold on to it. I'm good. So just a little bit about myself. As Donna said, I do not have a science background, but for some reason I always had scientists in the family and medical folks in the family, and I wanted to do it, but I knew I did not have the wherewithal to do it. So law school was my path, but I always seemed to gravitate towards the healthcare field. So when I first started out in the law firm, I was representing healthcare providers, so hospitals like Jefferson and physicians, and they were always doing very interesting deals with each other, so I loved that aspect of it. And then I went in-house. We leave the law firm and go into a corporation. I was at GlaxoSmithKline for about 15 years just doing deals. That's all I did around the world. And it was really a great experience because that's just how we built that pipeline for that company. Late stage deals, so there were commercial assets that we were co-promoting with other folks, early stage deals where we were developing them from the preclinical assets and taking them in-house. So really a lot of interesting novel transactions that we were doing there. I left large pharma, and I really wanted to get that small biotech experience, the companies that I was often buying and doing deals with on the other side. And so that's how I met Jane Hollingsworth and Joan Lau through Militia Hill Ventures. And they just at that time started a company called Tali Bio. They've done other companies before that, but Tali Bio, it's about 2016 when they had started that company. And it was great. It was technology out of a university that we had in-licensed. It was great technology, gene therapy for the treatment of cystic fibrosis, and we just formed a company around it. We were recently acquired in April of last year by a company called Roivant Sciences, and then they subsequently passed us on to another company called Sumitomo, a Japanese company. So it's been really just interesting to see how innovation, novel innovation coming out of the university is now here, and we have the resources to really just move it forward and hopefully to find a cure for patients who suffer from cystic fibrosis. So in addition, I've lived it and I've done it, so I really enjoy it. So it's very interesting. When people talk about business development, you always run into folks who say, I'm a biz dev guy, I'm a biz dev gal. What does that mean? What does that mean exactly? And sometimes they'll say, oh, sales, I do sales, or I'm a relationship builder, or I just hustle, whatever. I think of business development as bringing value to your organization and bringing value to your organization. But what you do in particular, it's about bringing that value and that promise to patients as well. That's always the back of my head. I like that part of it. That makes it kind of motivating when you're spending those late nights doing bills that hopefully making patients' lives better. So the key really, though, is for business development, and for you in particular, is getting those innovations, getting those ideas out. There's so much out there, so much in the universities, and how do we get that out? And really, it's just there's a number of ways to do it. And you look at the customer. Who's the customer? Big Pharma sometimes is a customer who I work with. We're always looking at new opportunities. Biotech is another customer. A little different. They're a little bit smaller, a little more nimble, a lot more nimble sometimes. And then in the academic world, I was talking to Donna and to Rose about what's happening here. It's amazing what Jefferson and others are doing just to get that technology out. But how does that happen? I mean, it probably seems seamless to you, but they're in the thick of it, and Heather's in the thick of it, so it's a lot going on. But what are some of the steps that you would take to get your technology out? And I just want to go through some of that. And I don't want to talk at you so much. If you can talk to me as well. If you have any questions about that, if you have, I have an innovation, I have an idea. How do I get that out to the customer? I think the first thing you need to think about is the market demand for your idea. You may think it's great, but you need to test that a little bit. What is the market out there for it? Is it a Me Too product? I mean, there could be a lot of other things out there. What's the differentiator between your product and what's out there already? Does it fill a market need that first you have to think about paying too for it. It's interesting in our space, unlike other industries where the customer and the payer are all mostly the same person, here it's a little bit different. So you may have the customer, the biotech, the pharma, that wants it, but then you have to deal with the insurance companies after that. And you have to kind of think about everything holistically when you think about, is this an opportunity for a business development type of deal? Now, I'm not an IP attorney. I will leave all of that to Heather. But you have to think about the IP as well. You want things to be novel. You're not going to be able to patent everything, but you want to think about it. You want to make certain that you think about, do I have exclusivity? Can I keep this to myself and create some value that way? And do I have freedom to operate? Am I infringing someone else's patents by doing this? And if so, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means, what do I need to think about so that I get the right to do that opportunity, to make that opportunity? And then again, just going back, once you look at the market and look at, is this a viable opportunity that someone would want, then check out the customer. Every customer is different. Big Pharma, some of them they're big for a reason. There's lots of cities, and sometimes you may get nervous about giving your asset off to someone, and it gets lost. You're not there anymore. They want to control everything, so you have to think about that as you're structuring your deal. Biotech, you may have a better opportunity to have some influence there. You may have some sponsored research agreements in place. You may be able to kind of be on a scientific advisory board, kind of manage that asset as it's going through the biotech. there are a lot of different things you can do. And then I love, and what Jefferson is doing with rolling out certain companies, how, if you have a technology, I forget what was the terminology that Rose said, up, spit up, spin up, spin out. I mean, they might do that with you, and then you have perhaps more influence in the trajectory of that innovation. So there's so many opportunities, but think about that as it's the market, but also the type of customer that fit your asset well and fit your personality well as also, because if you want to have that control, you have to think about that going forward also. And then it's the deal. I love this stuff. I love these deals, and there are so many different types of deals to do. So what do you do? And that's a question I get a lot from people. What kind of deal should I do? I have this invention, I have this innovation. What do I do? Do I sell it? Do I license it? Do I give all the rights away? What do I do? So there are some things to think about the types of deals that you want to do. An acquisition. So if you want to sell your asset, you are giving up total control. So think about that. And that might be what you want. I did my job, I created it, and now I just want it to go. And that's fine as well. But when you sell it, you also want to think about some of the upside. If it's an earlier stage asset, you may not get that value right away if you sell it. So you want to make certain you get some of that upside later on in the form of some type of performance milestones and things of that nature. And you want to keep the purchaser engaged. You want to make sure that they don't just purchase your asset and put it on a shelf somewhere. You want to keep them, so think about things such as reports and periodic updates and maybe some type of meetings with an alliance team to keep, so you know what's going on with your asset internally, particularly if you have downstream compensation attached to that. But that is a nice way, if it's just not, you're not a business person, you just really don't have an interest in that, that's a nice way to see some value and hopefully. And you need to be very clear, too, about who you sell it to then as well. What do they want to do with it? Get an understanding of, is their vision similar to what you want for your technology? Partnerships. When I was at GSK, we did a lot of partnerships, particularly with academic institutions. It was a lot of fun. They were complicated, though. But they were very fun just because a lot of just seeing what was coming out of Big Pharma. A lot of these partners, or academic institutions, a lot of these opportunities, the companies would work together. The academic institution would keep the asset, grow the asset. Big Pharma would fund it at different times and either take it in or spin it out. Partnerships are a nice way to test drive something. And it's good for both parties, actually. It's good for you because you can see, is this really where I want to go? Do I have a little control? How much control do I give up to the other side? You have a little more visibility with respect to how your asset is moving through. So partnerships are good, but they are partnerships, and you don't always agree, so you have to think about those things as well, and who has the final say with how that asset is progressed through development and onward as well. Now licensing. Licensing is, I don't know how much licensing you guys do here at Jefferson. 30 licenses a year. Wow.
Associated agreements.
Yeah.
Options,
licenses. Those, licenses are just, they're great because you get, to me it's a hybrid. It's the best of both worlds. You get to give the asset to somebody, but you can still keep some control over what's happening. You still own it, technically. When you out-license something to an academic institution or to a biotech, you still own it, but they have certain rights to it. And you can control that a little bit more. You control what types of rights you give them. Do you give them rights to all indications, to all methods of use, or do you carve that out a little bit? Now, some folks would not like to have that carved out, but that's a discussion you can have. Where? Maybe it's a biotech that has a strong U.S. presence, but this asset has capabilities around the world. So maybe just carve out this one territory and do another deal, perhaps, with another company for a different territory. So there are lots. You have a little more flexibility with the license, and then also the compensation structure for licenses vary as well. You may have upfront fees, you may have development and performance milestones throughout the life of the collaboration, and then if it's an asset that's commercialized, you may even have royalties on the back end. So there's a lot to do there with that type of agreement. And then, as Heather mentioned also, the option part of it. Options are great. Again, it's a nice way to kind of balance it for both parties. It's test driving a little bit. Let's see, the tire kicking, you know, on both ends. Test it out. We'll give it to you for a fixed period of time. You see what you want to do with it, and if we like it, then maybe we'll do something else. It is a nice way to test out an asset, and also for you to test out the partner. Because if you find that during that option period, there's just not a meeting of the minds. We don't think the same way. It's good for you as well. So it's a nice way to test drive the asset. But be careful. You don't want them to go on indefinitely. You want to have some parameters around what that option looks like. You want to be able to get your asset back. You don't want to give off and then there's no way for you to get it back, especially if the partner is really not being as diligent as you would like them to be with the asset. So those are the different ways that you can kind of get your asset out there. I was telling Donna, I want to open this up to the group here as far as business development. What have you heard about business development deals, questions that you have in deals that you may have evaluated? I know that you have this wonderful innovation pillar here, so they can answer all your questions, I'm sure. But as you just think about yourself, that you have an idea and kind of what's the next step? What should I be thinking about? How much information do I give away initially from a confidentiality perspective? We signed a confidentiality agreement. Do I still give them everything? What do I think about there? So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Don't show them your lead compound structure. Jane and Joan and I are all in agreement on that.
No, not
show them your lead compound
not even if you have a confidentiality agreement, right? No.
Hire a third-party medicinal chemist.
Yes.
Review.
Yes.
So I have two questions.
Yes.
One is, I think we always hear about the successes, right? Like Spark makes the news, right? Carl June and Community makes the news. I think what we don't hear about is the companies that don't make it, right? Like they just die quietly in the night. And honestly, the streets are littered with the corpses of those companies,
They
right?
really are.
There are far more of them.
Far more of them.
Which is why things like Spark and Community make the news. And so I have my own thoughts, but I'm curious to hear yours on what is the leading cause of death of a company, because we never really do the forensics on that,
So true. Very good question. The leading cause of death. Oh gosh, it can be just a number of things. It can be, sometimes it depends on the structure of the company. It could be in the investors sometimes, which sometimes they just control everything that's going on. They want a return and want a return quickly. And they may drive certain decisions, development decisions, that may not be best for the asset, but they give you the right press release you want to have that day. They give you the right message you want to give that day. So sometimes it's what's driving the development activity is not really the best science, but it's other factors. So that can kill a program easily. I think it's people who you have to pressure test your idea. You may think it's the best thing, and all of your KOLs think it's the best thing out there. Get outside and see what other people think about that asset. And are you doing the right things? We are constantly, at our company now, we're constantly talking to other people. What's out there? And for us, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, I mean, they know everything. Getting involved, getting other people out there who are seeing other things and can kind of test what you're doing along the way. I think that's actually important as well. And knowing when to stop. Knowing when, if the data doesn't look good, you need to stop. You can't force it. And I think a lot of people just force it, and you see that long, slow death. Exactly. And others knew it was going to happen all the time. It was just painful. So knowing when to pull it immediately. So yeah.
Maybe we need to start thinking about mortality and morbidity rounds in commercial space as opposed to just...
Interesting article for somebody to do forensics on the stuff we never heard of.
Okay, so that's at least two
great.
interesting
And you don't
articles.
you hear about the one Spark, but you don't hear about the 100 others that are, that's exactly right.
The thing is, though, the people will rarely give you the details on what really happened.
No.
So it is truly forensics, it is truly
Yeah. And I hear these things from stories from different people. The VCs killed me. I couldn't do anything. I heard, so, yeah.
And people will blame, the investors, but it may well be that the lead people in the company had a completely wrong vision from a business standpoint.
That's exactly right. That's
There's
exactly
a
right.
versioning of it.
And what we're also working on too is how much do you do, especially with a small company. When you're in Big Pharma, it's a little bit different. Everything is in-house. They have all the labs and the manufacturing facilities and the people. So most things are done in-house. Some things are outsourced, but most things are done in-house. In a small biotech, you have to weigh those those factors. How much do we build in-house versus giving it to the outside, CROs, clinical research organizations, or contract research organizations, or contract manufacturing organizations, but then you lose control, right? So you have to balance that, because if you give everything outside, you may not know what's going on, and the robustness of your program may be compromised.
So how about one more reason, lack of funds to support the technology to get into the clinical trials. Have you any experience with that or a comment to that? Particularly true for the small biotechnology companies.
Yeah, that's probably one key factor. The money runs dry. And the money runs dry for a number of reasons. Either you're just not getting the data that you want, they're just not seeing the opportunity, or things are just progressing slower. And the market, again, going back to that market, the market has changed from when you started, from when I invested. There's other competition out there. There are other factors that have happened. Maybe the payer landscape has changed, where this doesn't look so profitable and valuable 5 years later. So that can also cause some of that as well. But absolutely. And you need to manage that. There was a company, a great company, and they were on the cusp of doing another deal. They couldn't do it, and they just had to, just start closing everything down. But they're waiting for the next few. Keep going to the extent that he can, and see what else is out there. Yeah.
This is one of our students from, our interns from Population Health, Jin.
Huh?
Hello. This might be kind of a basic question, but the field of business development, I don't really know about it, but what are some of the qualities that you look for in a team? Like, what are their backgrounds when you usually have a business development department?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good question. The business development department they really are, I think, first, it depends on what you are doing. And here, I'm focusing this mostly on the pharma, biotech, life sciences space. You need to have people who know that space. So I can't be the only one with my economics degree and law degree running a business development team for a pharma company or a biotech company. You need someone who understands the science, who knows what it is that you're looking for, understands the company's pipeline, understands what you're looking for to fill that pipeline from a scientific perspective. So a lot of companies, you have someone who's just the scientist, who just tests the science. They know what's out there. They know everything that's out there. All the products that are out there, they know everything. So you need that in your team. You need those folks who can just, who can look at the horizon. I'd say, again, as we said earlier, things change. You need to be able to know how quickly, if I in-license something now that's preclinical, and it takes maybe 10 years for us to get to the phase 3 and hopefully that BLA filing. What does the landscape look like at that point? You need those types of strategists in there as well, who can model that out as well. What else is out there? Competitive analysis. What else is out there that's coming in from everywhere around the world, so you know what's happening. You always have your finance types in business development. As you're doing the deals, they need to be able to model this out, how much you're going to spend to get the asset, how much you're going to spend on the asset once you have it in-house, and then what revenues are going to generate. Again, what does the market look like, and what that competition is. And then every once in a while, they like the lawyers to come in. You definitely need an IP lawyer. Those are probably the most important ones to evaluate that asset from, as we said, exclusivity perspective and freedom to operate. And then they bring in the transaction lawyers like me. So yeah. But I'd say it's a very diverse team. You need diversity on a business development team, because there's so many different areas to consider. Yeah. So,
could you maybe talk a little bit about transitioning from Big Pharma into your space? And I'm sure you're looking over your shoulder at what's going on in Big Pharma. Give us your take on what is going on over there and how it impacts the decisions that you might make in terms of rolling your own processes, projects forward.
So Big Pharma, I love my experience at Big Pharma. I love the company I was there with. It's a big company. You're focusing on a lot of corporate and business issues. You're there to drive the value of that organization and to drive shareholder price up, but they really cared about the patient. I love that about that company. So when we in-licensed assets, we knew we were taking in someone else's baby, or we acquired something, it was someone else's baby that you had to manage. And I like the way that they treated assets within GSK. But sometimes what was interesting is I remember I was out in California and I was doing a deal with a company. It was a phase 3 asset. So they were just finishing up their phase 3 trials and hopefully about to apply for their NDA at the time, their new drug application. And we in-licensed this asset, and because it was phase 3, a ton of money. You know, I'm out there in California just, you know, all day. We were told not to come back to Philadelphia until the deal was done. So there I am, living off the side of the highway, you know, doing this deal. And I get back, and I first, before I leave, I go back to the company we were doing the deal with, and I see all these boxes in the hallway. Like, what is this? Champagne. They had champagne ready for when we were going to sign this deal. That company was shutting down, and they just did a deal with this big pharma company, and they were going to celebrate. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So I go back home, and you know, I have about 2,000 emails waiting for me because I've been in California the entire time. And you know, when we signed the deal, and you exchange some pages via email anymore, so it's not ceremonial or anything. And you know, you get the congratulatory, good job, nice work, but then you go back to your normal work. And I missed that, you know, it was a big company, so it was just one deal, you know. It was a big deal, but it was one deal. It wasn't, you know, and I missed that rush of excitement. And that was one of the things that drove me to look at a biotech company and to go into to work with Mulch Hill Ventures to get that. I just want that feeling. I just want that feeling of just that excitement. Now, on the flip side, going back to the timing of the deals, we did that deal for a purpose because one of our key assets was going off patent. So we needed to fill that asset. So, but there were some issues with development. The NDA was filed a little bit later than we wanted. Our asset went off patent. By that point, it's really hard to regain the market share that you had. So it just wasn't a success, and we tried, and you amend the agreement, you work with a partner. It wasn't a success. For us, okay, you know, you work with it. For them, it was devastating. It was devastating. So the highs and lows are just extreme in a biotech. But it was it's so much fun though. So that's what drove me to it. But what I have learned from working in a biotech is really, and having worked from a big pharma and now working in a biotech, is really just trying to, I guess, pay attention to your asset. And I think my company did that well when I was in Big Pharma, but from really listening, I think you have a lot of input in Big Pharma because there's so many people there, lots of committees. Sometimes the committees can slow things down, but at the same time, things are being pressure tested constantly. And I think sometimes in a smaller company, you have your little group and you all kind of speak the same speak and no one's testing that. So I think we try to make certain that we have that pressure testing, not just inside, but outside. So I think we're trying to put those types of practices in place as well. And also, we all know, so everybody at my current company, we've all been at Big Pharma, and we know at the end of the day, we're not going to commercialize our asset. Most of the time, some biotechs, Spark and other bigger ones, will commercialize their asset. More often than not, you take your asset to a certain phase, and then you might just send it off to Big Pharma. I know what Big Pharma is looking for when they're in licensing an asset. That rigor is just, you lose money if they have to redo certain things because you just cut corners and didn't do things properly. So I think our internal team, we realize that you have to do things properly. You can't cut corners. You have to be very process-oriented, not to slow it down. I mean, the beauty of biotech is that you can still move quickly, but you have to do it in the right way. So I think we've learned that you can't cut corners. You may be tempted to cut corners because you want to keep moving things along, but we try to do things the right way so that when we do have to give it to Big Pharma, it's ready to go. It's ready to go. We're not taking a hit for that. So yes. No, any other questions? So, yeah.
I knew Heather had a second question. Because
that's
I
okay.
only heard you ask one, and you said you had two. So
I'm actually going to put my other one aside because you've touched on it.
Oh.
I don't know if people here know that you and Jane and Joan are like locally famous. Like you really maybe
They
even
are.
maybe even globally famous.
No.
But Hope and Jane, everybody knows them. They're a brand. And I think the intrepid thing you guys have done has been women dominating this space who are not, white. And I want to hear a bit, if you don't mind sharing, about venturing into that space with the diversity of the group that you work with and the challenges that you face in that regard, because it is not a woman-heavy space.
No.
It is not a minority or diverse space.
No. I'm usually the only one. I'm usually the only one. I tell a story when I was at Big Pharma and I was doing a deal with a Japanese company. Hope didn't really translate well into, they didn't know what sex I was. So when I went over there, not only was I a woman, but then there's this black woman standing in front of them, they're like, what? I didn't know. So I'm used to that. Sometimes I use it to my advantage. I was not caught off guard. I knew, so it was fine. But yeah, you just have to have a sense of self-awareness. And I think like anything, you belong in that room. I was recently at an event we had, so we are now owned by a Japanese company. And they want to come to Philadelphia to see what gene therapy space was like in Philadelphia. So Joan, with all of her contacts, we had a nice meeting with just CEOs, the C-suites of various gene therapy companies. A really nice meeting, and they were able to see what was going on in the Philadelphia area. And one Caucasian gentleman came up to me and said, your hair. And I'm like, okay then. Like, we're at a cocktail party, there's CEOs, and he's talking about my hair. And you just let it go. But I'm confident in what I can do. I belong in the room. And I think we all, what I try to see is that we're all coming from the same place. And it's nice to have diversity. And I think I like to have that diversity in the room. And I think people end up appreciating it also. So yeah. But it's amazing what they're doing. And they're being so intentional about how they want to promote women in life sciences. And I think you have to be intentional about it. And minorities in life sciences, because you can't just let it happen. I think there's so much talent out there. And it's just, it's a fun space to be a part of. So, and there's so much going on out there. And innovation, you need to have diversity of thought. If you don't have diversity of thought and diversity of experience, the innovation is not going to be that dynamic. And whether you're doing it or whether you're looking for it and trying to identify what's out there. So I think that's important.
Speaking about diversity and different forms of input into the deals that you're doing, what about diversity of input coming from patients involved in IRBs and clinical trials?
That is key. It's interesting. Our company started Tally Bio. There's a woman named Emily Kramer-Golenkoff, and she has an organization, a family foundation called Emily's Entourage. She suffers from cystic fibrosis. Apparently there's 10% of the cystic fibrosis population. Their type of mutation is such where none of the current treatments out there work for her. So a lot of companies have things that are more, they address the symptoms, but they don't work for her. So it was a patient that came to us and said, I need help. And we know there's technology out there, and can you try to find this technology? So what Jane and Joan did is they basically talked to people, and they looked at the market to see what's out there, and that's how they learned that there's 10% of this population that had the same type of issue that she had. They talked to the customer, who's going to sell this, Big Pharma. Big Pharma, this is the market, this is the size. Are you willing would you be willing to take on that asset? And they said, yeah, we could sell this. Then you talk to venture, because we needed money to do this. We had this great idea, but is there money? And they said, yeah, we would fund that. We would fund that type of opportunity for that patient population without a cure. We think we would do it. Jane and Joan, okay, that's great. So now we need to find what that is. So Joan likes to say they boiled the ocean, and they just looked and looked and looked and looked, and eventually they found the same little cluster of people. The names kept coming up. They talked to Emily and others who are, because they're in that space, they know others physicians who are also working on that. And we found a group of physicians and PhDs at the University of Iowa, of all places. Iowa, go figure. So we in-licensed that technology, and we formed Tally Bio. Tally is Emily's Hebrew name, and that's what we called the company. And we were able to get investors in that, and we were able to use the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which has their hands on the pulse of patients everywhere. So that was just great. So the patient input is absolutely necessary and critical, I think. And it was interesting to me just hearing some of the stories about things that are coming out of this institution, just because Heather was telling me about some type of device that helps properly position a woman before she gets an epidural shot. And I mean, so many friends I have are like, oh, it was terrible. It was a bad experience. But again, patient input, forming innovation, and moving it out. I think you need the patient. Absolutely need the patient. Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in? Because otherwise I'm going to ask, oh, fine.
You had mentioned competitive analysis earlier, and looking at that, if you're with a company that's developing something pipeline-wise, you're obviously going to keep that close to your chest, right?
Yeah.
So how do you know what your competitors are doing in that space, and how can you look at the competitive landscape in an intelligent manner?
Yeah, well, it depends on the type of company. Public companies have to disclose certain things, so you get it through public information. And then also we've used also things like, again, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, foundations that are out there, they know everything that's out there. But they're not disclosing what people are doing, but you can get a sense of where programs are, what technologies have been licensed, there's just a lot of information, whether it's from the VCs that have information out there. Some things have to disclose themselves because they are legally obligated to do so. Companies that are about to go public, when they file an S1, there's lots of information that gets out there through that. So you hear it in those ways. Yeah. And then it's amazing the community of whether it's physicians, PhDs, and where we are in the cystic fibrosis area. They talk, they get together, they meet, they want to cure this disease, so they know what's out there, and you hear different things. So you try to keep your ears open for things, and you want to know, okay, what stage of development are they in, and why? Okay, what happened? We heard that they were doing something, and then it slowed down. What happened? Why did it slow down? Because you can try to figure it out. We may not always know, but you can try to figure, okay, what's happening here? Was it a manufacturing issue? Was it something else that happened? So yeah.
So I'm going to take a point of personal
Sure.
privilege.
Sure.
So we're in a hyper political environment at the moment for a whole bunch of reasons. Suppose we could make you president.
Oh, I don't want that.
I know you don't. I know you don't. But suppose we could make you president,
Yeah.
and in addition to the million other things you'd have to do both domestically and internationally,
Yeah.
obviously you'd have an interest in how we grow and care about this space. What are the policy phenomena that you'd like to see roll forward that would impact the world that you live in and the prospects for places like Jefferson to be further advanced in the kinds of things that we want to do?
First of all, I think grant funding. I just think there needs to be more money put into development and research and universities. And I mean, just that to me, I would just try to increase grant funding going out there. I think that's necessary. And then you have this entire, I mean, you can develop everything you need, but if you can't pay for it, that's a problem. So I don't, however people want to pay, I don't know if I'm a universal healthcare person, but I think everybody should have access to healthcare. Because if we develop this cure for cystic fibrosis and no one can afford it, that's not good. So I think we need to think about that too. But I'm also on the business side of this. There's a lot of money that goes spent to acquire these assets, to develop them. It is not, there is real money being spent for real work to progress these assets to ensure that they're safe and that they work and that you can manufacture them. So there has to be an incentive for people to continue doing that. So people should still make money, companies should still make money, but we still need people to be able to access that help. That is just so key. And then just, again, the grant funding. Sometimes I just see the lack of, I don't know, it's tough dealing with the government sometimes and just how complicated some things are just to get that funding out. So I would try to ease those things a little bit.
Anybody else have questions for Madam
I
President?
don't want to be president, though, Madam President.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had a really great comment from last week's presenter, and what they were talking about was, when it comes to success, a lot of really successful people, it's not about passion, it's about obsession. So I'd like to hear, what are you obsessed about that keeps you going and keeps you excited about your space?
What I'm obsessed about, and what keeps me going is, I think because I'm not a scientist, when I hear about what's going on, I'm like, wow, that is just so cool. I can't believe they're doing that. I can't believe they want, and I get amazed by it. I think when I see what you all are doing out there, I'm like, someone has to know, someone has to see that. It has to get out. So that's what keeps me going. And it's funny because when I started this, my God, probably 2000 in Big Pharma, and everything was a small molecule. Everything was just, it was not that it was easy, but it was just, and we see what's going on now in cell and gene therapy and just so many different things. It's amazing. It's amazing. And then I like also what I'm seeing with you guys. Sometimes you get in your own little bubble of cell and gene therapy, and then I'm hearing about, with the mixing textile innovation with medical innovation. Like, what? I like to hear more, like, what is that about? How do you do that? How do you leverage these two? And I think that's what keeps me going. I am not an innovative person. When we see that question over there about, who needs to be on your business development team, I'm the lawyer. I draft the documents. I tell you what your risks are. But when I see what people are thinking, I'm like, how did you think about that? What made you do that to get to that spot? So that is just amazing to me. And if I can help keep it going, if I can help when I'm out and about and people ask me that they have something, I want to help them get that out there because I think it's amazing. People have that.
Well, I just want to say, people like you and Heather blow up the stereotypes of lawyers. I mean, you guys are, there's no stereotype that you could fit into in terms of the legal world. I mean, the value added proposition is pretty amazing. Anybody else? Okay.
I probably don't need a mic. I'm the first of 6 children, so I can.
You're good.
I'm glad you brought up the money. Because I have an idea. If money really was the answer, we'd have the cure for so many things. I'm sitting there thinking of all the Jerry Lewis and the marathons.
Yeah,
and
yes.
But that had added up to billions of dollars. And we still are no closer to finding the cure for muscular dystrophy. So you were saying, if you were Madam President, one of the things you would like to look for is the grant money. But when is enough enough? And how can we turn it around? We're in a litigious society, so a lot of that money, I'm sure, is going for these added rules. With respect to your profession, I would like to say that it is your profession that has caused many of these
Right.
documents and things that need to be filled. So can you see a time, or do you have any idea of when we can reverse it, or give us a number of money? And once we reach that amount, we can then roll these things out. Is it because we're litigious and that's why we'll never be able to put a cap on these things? Is it because, what is it, if I can grant you right now, I will grant you the money, make you president, and I will give you that money that you need.
I think I'm going to take grief for this.
I think so.
Okay. I'm just establishing
I
that.
think so.
Do you see where I'm going with this? It's just, I heard your answer, and it just seems like when it's enough, it's more and more and more and more and more money, and yet we haven't found a cure. I have a family all in business and construction.
Yeah.
They often comment about healthcare, and they say, when I go to do a job, if I don't find that leak, I have one, they're both plumbers. So if I don't find that leak, I don't get paid. If I do something, I make a mistake, I don't get paid. That's not true in our career. So I guess my question is, the money did hit a thing with me, because when does it stop, or when have we reached enough, or when will we reach the solution?
There are a few questions in there, so
Sure.
just choose
Yeah,
whichever ones
yeah.
you feel like you want to answer
Absolutely.
in our limited time.
Sure. Oh, gosh. I mean, I agree with you. Things have become a little overly regulated. And maybe that happens for a lot of reasons. Something goes wrong and you want to fix it, and sometimes you overcorrect, right? And that's just the nature of things. I don't know. I don't know. I keep hearing about cuts in funding, NIH funding. I know you said that there's a lot of money out there and nothing's happened. I don't know. This is probably not a great answer, but this is why I like scientists. I believe there's someone out there who, with the money, can find, you have to exhaust every opportunity, and you still need the money to keep going further. And I think there's always that one step that someone just didn't take. That's why I love scientists, that they didn't take, that someone else takes, and then that's it. That's it. But again, to me, it means you still need the money to take that step that someone else didn't take. But to your point, we need to make it easier for people to get access to funding. I have filled out a number of SBIR grants and it is cumbersome. It's a lot. And there are reasons why. I mean, this is taxpayer dollars that are going out there. You want to make certain it's done in the right way. You want to make certain that there's no fraud involved. So there are reasons why you have to do it. But if there's a way you can make it, if I was president, more money, but then also make it more efficient for you to get access to that money. But again, trying to make certain that people are doing the right thing with it and that they're not misusing those funds. Yeah.
Can you please join me in thanking our guests for this amazingly terrific presentation?
Thank you. Thank you.